everybody? Welcome to another Practical Pet Chat. There are so many things going on in our worlds on a regular basis, but what's most important is those beings we love. One of the things that I do for my being that I love so much is I've got multiple ways to make sure if she ever gets lost, we've got multiple ways to get back in touch with her. I've got a GPS collar. I've got her microchipped. And yes, today we're going to talk about microchipping, amongst other things. Lorin, let's start with you, though, because I know you've got some thoughts on microchipping.
Oh, I have mixed feelings about microchipping. I think that it's not a one size fits all. So I think you need to look at your ability to adequately contain your kids. Um, and the reason I say that is because in the past, I've been all about microchipping. I liked it because it was a means of identification, meaning that if the chip is registered to you, and it's oftentimes looked at in legal situations as proving ownership. And, the thought was always, there's been stories over the years, there was a famous Hollywood person whose dog was taken and the way that she was able to prove ownership was because the chip was registered to her and it was a whole legal battle. But I also knew a customer whose neighbors bonded with the dog and then just one day decided to keep the dog. And it got real ugly because the dog went to both of them. So law enforcement was like, we don't know what to tell you. And they thought it was going to become a civil suit, and it started to be, but then the microchip got in the mix of it, and the microchip was registered to the rightful owners. So all of that said, I didn't microchip these two dogs. All my last 12 dogs that I had all at once, they were all microchipped. My cats were microchipped. Everybody was indoors. It's not like they were going to get out or run the streets or, get lost. They were never alone, that kind of thing. Um, but I feel differently about it now because unfortunately I've learned a lot more information and I'm worried about microchips migrating. I've seen it. I've seen situations where people bring in a lost dog and we had scanners at the store. We would
Right.
scan the chip and we couldn't find it. And then come to find out it had migrated to a different part of the body that we didn't scan that area for. I mean, like so far away from the point of implantation. So I worry about that. There has a lot of people worried about cancer and things like that. That hasn't been as prevalent. That's not to say that it hasn't happened or couldn't happen. And is that the causation? Anytime anything foreign is in the body, it's an issue. Could be an issue. But my own particular dogs are never going to be away from me. They're never going to be in a situation that they're alone or that they're going to get free. They're never out with us that they're not harnessed. And it's, famous last words, never say never. I just feel pretty confident about it. And not to mention they're 3 pounds. So a microchip exponentially gets significantly bigger in a 3 pound dog than it gets in
Sure.
a 50-pound dog. And so that causes me a little bit more concern. So I have mixed feelings about it. I think if people aren't always certain that they're going to contain their kid, that if they're worried about somebody letting the kid out from the gate, the dog jumping a fence, digging under a fence, anything like that, then it's cause for concern. It is a way to get your kid back to you. However, there's also the issue that the only way that happens is if the microchip is scanned by a third party who is intent on getting it back to its original owner. And if people know there's a microchip for a dog that they found, they don't want to give it back, then they make sure that that doesn't happen, that the scanning doesn't happen.
Sure. Sure. No, I like that. You hit on a number of considerations that I think you've got to look at and make a personal decision on. Um, I I don't even want to say I disagree or I differ from you. I think when I go through those and I look at for my personal situation and then most people that I talk to, um, I'm one of those. I've got multiple. I've got the GPS color, I've got the microchip, and I, like you, have done a lot, not just with rescues, but other organizations where microchipping has made a difference in reuniting. And it's kind of where I fall on it, at least, is that good, better, best. Um, it's good that you've got a collar with a dog tag. It's better for me, at least in my judgment, that you've got something that cannot be taken off, cannot get lost. Although I do love that you pointed out, not only do they migrate, but there are times when they stop working. My answer to that and my reminder to everybody is just like change different things, the filters in your air conditioning, all the rest of that every quarter. Set a cadence where, hey, I'm making sure I'm checking everything with my pet, that's going to bring them home. GPS collar, you should be checking that. I check it daily anyway, right? But I have her scanned every time we go to the vet or a place that has one of those. And this is the key: don't go to a place that's got a specific brand. Now, most places now are using the universal scanners, which I love because the amount of times a few years ago where people go, oh, the pet's not chipped. And then now we're putting a second and a third chip. That's
Right.
that's just not needed. They just don't have the right scanner quite often. But these days, it's more prevalent to have that universal scanner. But what information is in that scanner? People change their phone numbers, you change your address, things get lost, data gets corrupted. So make that a part of that regular visit, um, because I've just seen it too often. And at the end of the day, it's kind of like that whole thing of, gosh, I wish I had. If I, I try and look at those. I go far ranging. I totally, am that paranoid guy of let me, Doctor Strange, there's 50 different ways to the outcome. Um, and I would feel frustrated with myself if I didn't have something that nobody, nefariously, not nefariously, could have taken off. But I do agree with you. It's like an air tag. It requires someone to take a proactive action
Mhm.
to identify and then reunite. Um, but I'll take that chance. At least give me that chance, I guess is the way to put it. Um, and then the other part of that is how many stories I've just heard and have been shared with me over the years of, oh my gosh, we were reunited 9 months later, 8 months later, because of that's I mean that just warms my heart each time of, man, never lose hope when a dog gets lost. And I guess that's my other reason for it is there are so many ways for our pets to get out and get away from us. I want every option to reunite with them and give them the care and love that I want to, and know that they deserve. So I am a big microchip guy. Nothing more frustrating to me than when, I'll stop and it's funny. I just had someone who didn't know me very well traveling down here with me, and they got in the car and I was like, hey, I'm sorry about the dog treats, but I'm that guy that's got the, extra leashes and dog treats in the car because if I see a dog out there running, my mom taught me many years ago, be a difference maker. And so I'll stop and I'll go. First stop is where's the nearest vet place, and I'll take him in and we'll try and get him microchipped, etc. And when there's no microchip, no collar, it just breaks my heart, because I'll see them, and sometimes I can tell that the people that have them love them. They're groomed nice, they're behaved nice, and it's like, I want to get you back to that great environment. And I don't know how to do that. Now we got to rely on, posting on all these different social networks, which many times gets there. But gosh, that's just such a delay. And it doesn't always happen. And so, it's a shame. So I do like microchipping, but I understand what you're saying with not just some of the risks, but the responsibility of that as well. Um, Certainly comes with that at a different level than some of the other things that we can do.
Yeah, I mean, those heartwarming stories are best case scenario,
Yeah.
and I love them too. I've seen the other side of it in a variety of ways too. And that just I've seen enough of that that it gave me cause for concern to really think about whether or not I wanted to microchip these two dogs. There's just no guarantee you're going to get the kid back, especially if it's a small dog. I
I
can
love that you
remember,
call that out, by the way, because we talk about sizing in dogs, but cats, there's not really tremendously different in the cat size unless you're getting a Savannah. So from the standpoint of that is something you got to factor in. So I do agree with you, and especially when you get to the tiniest of the tinies, um, that may not be, the best thing for
yeah.
them. Um,
I had a client that came in one time and she booked a grooming appointment. And she brought the dog in for us to give her a quote and really cute little dog. And she found the dog. And I said, "Oh, are you getting it groomed because it's been out on the street?" She goes, "Well, yeah." She goes, "But I want it to look different."
oh no.
I'm like, why?" And she said, "Well, because I don't want somebody to be able to claim it." She goes, "I do know it has a microchip though, because I had another place scan it." And
Oh
I
my
said, "Did you?"
gosh.
I was beside myself. I was just, and I know she could see it. And she didn't book the appointment, probably because she could read my face, but I knew that if we took that dog in, I was going to scan it and
Yeah,
contact the owners. It was a quandary. I mean, I was really in a dilemma because, from a business standpoint, that's a terrible idea, to get in
yeah,
the middle of that. From a moral and ethical standpoint, I would have had to scan that kid, and at least make an attempt. But the fact that she was so blatant about, yeah, I want it to look different. I don't want anybody to be able to claim her. I was
yeah.
like,
That's
no.
that's next level. That's
Right.
that is
So, that along with, I've seen dogs with two or three microchips in them, I've seen dogs where you scan them and you call and the people don't want it back, and where they have chips and you call and that's not the right number and the right. And it's really frustrating because it's not, and that's the other thing. A lot of people have a misunderstanding about microchips. They think it's GPS. Not so much
right.
anymore, but years ago they did. And maybe people who still don't know what they are. They think that they're going to be able to find their dog. You can only find your dog if someone finds your dog for you or your cat and is willing to take the steps to get the kid back to you, which, requires an animal lover with a conscience, not somebody who selfishly wants to keep the dog for themselves. And it just, I don't know. Again, I think the size had a lot to do with my decision for me. But early on, when, I used to have microchip clinics at my store too. And I really thought that absolutely every kid should be microchipped. And I just have gotten away from the every kid should be microchipped to, it just sort of depends. And when people have asked me, I've walked them through that. You ever going to take a trip and somebody's going to house sit for you, pet sit for you? Are you going to want to board your kid because they usually want a microchip? Are you ever going to be away from your kid that your kid could be in a position to get out, get lost, get free? And
Yeah,
if they can't absolutely answer unequivocally, I'm in total control, then you should get your kid chipped.
yeah. I like that you bring up too. There are a lot of places that do require it. It's kind of
Mhm.
interesting that has evolved over the years. And I know even from a travel standpoint, there are some requirements from different places that will require you have
Mhm.
your pet microchipped.
Right.
And I think that's great. Again, I understand where you're coming from, and I agree with you in that situation. I just think the predominant, and I just have such little faith. But you hit on something that is interesting, because there have been times where that call goes over. It's like, oh, that's not my dog. Okay, are you sure? Because your name is, yeah, no, not. We gave that dog away a while ago. I at least can then feel comfortable and good about if somebody else wants to, foster, take that dog in, adopt it into their family, and close the door on that, document it, spoke to them, etc. I've had the situation once where someone would not sign. I said, "Listen, I get it.
Hmm.
Um, you've moved on, but this beautiful being here has a chance to continue in a different family. We just want to make sure they don't ever have any complications. You don't want to be responsible for this pet because if something happens, you're on the hook right now as the registered owner through this chip. So can you please sign the and we had to get to that level before they
Right.
finally agreed that like, okay, yeah, it's mine, but I just, don't have time and I'll save my internal thoughts
Yeah,
for
me too.
thoughts. Um, but that's that other part that like, hey, look, if you're someone who wants to know, I changing the look of the dog. That's like okay,
Right?
you
It
know,
was appalling. I was really taken aback. I couldn't believe they
that is
just
crazy.
openly stated that and thought that that was going to be an acceptable
That
answer.
that
That I
really
would be
works.
like, oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah, that is wild. Although I guess my creative groomers are going, I can do that. Let's turn it into but that is wild. And I also like that you said too. I think there's a higher level of understanding these days of what the microchip is and isn't. That was one of my frustrations in the past. I don't need to have a collar because I've got them microchipped. And I'm like,
Right.
that is the dumbest thing I've heard. That it's not like we all walk around with a scanner and literally just a few years ago, and there are still places who only have one or two types of the chip
Mhm.
scanners that are out there. So if they don't have a universal, why take that risk? That it's just so ridiculous. And the GPS aspect of it is another part that really it's like, oh, I microchip, so I'm going to find them automatically. No, you're not. But if they are found, now we've got a pathway. And I would say most rescue and centers now have that universal reader and that's their first go-to because they just don't have the ability to house five more pets that come in each week. So I'm going to believe in the positive on this one of like, hey, they're going to be trying to reunite that dog with their owner at all costs and let's do that. We have had a dog missing in our area for now almost 3 months. And what was interesting was yesterday because it was holiday time, they were hitting everybody up, going, "Hey, we think Daisy might." You know, she got out of our yard. She might get out of wherever she's at. We're hoping she's being loved and cared for. And I just kept thinking to myself, I was like, man, if they could go back, all the different things they would do. So that's where I put myself when I look at all these different things and I go, hey, yeah, but I also work with Bell. I can say, from literally, where we are in our complex, I can say, hey, Bell, go home. And I know she'll go home whether she's on the leash or not. Um, and we have a lot of the dogs that come down into our area. Um, and it's always remarkable to me because they know, but if they got outside the gates, I would be really concerned for all of them. And I'll just say it amazes me how many times I have the neighbors' dogs come over and visit Belle, and they don't have a collar. They don't have, things that it's like, wow, that's remarkable. So we do all get a false sense of security, is what I'm getting at here. You're
Hmm.
like, oh, that would never happen. That can't happen. That this, that. And then you end up in that situation going, oh my God. And how many times, Lauren, do you and I talk about things that were preventable? And that's where I just come back on this. It's like, take those precautions. But again, I agree with you. The sizing of the pet always has to matter and be taken into consideration because it does make a difference. And this is one of those areas where you really kind of open my mind to this of, yeah, I'm not sure if I would do that with a little, 2 or 3 pound that's always going to be with me, always going to be in the house. Um, I get that. I can understand that thinking.
That's what I'm saying. You just have to, everybody has to consider what works for them. It's a
Yeah,
lot like the revelation for people, and we won't discuss this on this particular recording, but when people found out that the vaccine given to a 100-pound dog is the same amount of vaccine given to a 3-pound dog. And it's like you don't see exponentially the
yeah,
effect, cause and effect for a little tiny 3-pounder versus a 100-pound dog, how much
right,
more that is in the body. And then people were like, oh crap, yeah, I do. But if my kids spent time outside, I have wooden fences around my property, easy to dig under. If they were going to a daycare or something like that, it would be different.
right, right. No, great discussion. Hey, folks, let us know what your thoughts are. Are your pets microchipped? If they are, why? If they aren't, why? Send us an email to practicalpetchat@gmail.com. Hit us up on all the different platforms we're on, our website, etc. There are a lot of ways to share your thoughts and ideas, not just with Laura and I, but everybody here. We know you've got a lot going on in your life. We appreciate you taking a few minutes with us. Thanks for joining us here on Practical Pet Chat.
Thanks, everybody.
The content of this podcast is for informational purposes only. It is not intended as, nor should it be construed as, professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment for your pets. Always seek the advice of a qualified veterinarian with any questions you may have regarding your pet's health or medical condition. Never disregard professional veterinary advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this podcast. The hosts and the guests of this podcast are not liable for any actions taken based on the information shared during these episodes. Any reliance on the information provided is solely at your own risk. Copyright 2025 Practical Pet Chat, all rights reserved. Unauthorized duplication, distribution, or reproduction of any content from this podcast, including but not limited to audio, scripts, and show notes, is prohibited without prior written consent. The opinions and views expressed by the host and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of Practical Pet Chat.